Okay, well, welcome everyone to the final summer session of our Leading Patriots series. Today, I'm very excited and honored to be joined by an illustrious panel of human resource, human capital, and HR experts, all connected with Mason, all connected with what we are trying to do with executive development and the Alumni Association. I'm going to be your moderator and host in this final panel, as always, through all of these. My name is Brett Josephson. I'm the Associate Dean for Executive Development in the School of Business and an Associate Professor of Marketing as well. Just want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to do a relatively slow start to let a few more people enter from the attendees, but as we get going, I want to provide an overview of what this series has been trying to accomplish over the last 6 to 8 weeks of its run. We sat down together, Executive Development, the Alumni Association, and several of the other schools on campus, and so we wanted to provide a platform for friends of Mason, Mason alumni, those connected to the university, to highlight the challenges and the actions that they are taking, specifically leading patriots, people within more senior roles in these organizations and industries, the actions that they are taking to survive and move their organization forward through COVID. That was kind of the initial setup. And then as we were going through this, obviously COVID has changed a little bit. We started getting a social justice movement that has come out through this series. We've been adjusting kind of the content, the framing of the discussions to address those issues. And now we're starting to look at the reopening of both higher education and then the workforce, as many states are either accelerating into phase 3 or even now potentially pulling back with some of the higher numbers. And so with this, the whole idea is to provide content from executive development, from the Alumni Association, from our key alumni and stakeholders from around the university on core topics and core industries of focus. This is one that's been on our calendar for a long time. We really wanted to make it impactful because we're aware of all the issues and challenges that are being kind of brought to the fore to people in the human resource space and to these individuals who have to design cultures for an organization, who have to onboard employees and have to deal with all the actions to allow us to do our jobs. So with that, really excited for this one. Just a little bit about our Alumni Association and then executive development. This is a partnership that I care deeply about because it represents Mason's commitment to our alumni and to our students. From the moment you go to the university and then you graduate, that if you're through the Alumni Association, we are there for you, and the executive development is going to be that additional arm or connection back into the university. We want to stay connected with you as you go through the many different avenues and journeys that your career takes, and be there to provide whatever resource you need to be successful in your life and in your career. So I'm really excited by the partnership with Michelle Murphy, Jen Robinson out of the Advancement Alumni Association, and obviously with Sumit Srivastava, who's the president-elect of the Alumni Association. So with that, I'm going to stop, at least for now, and I want to give our audience, our panelists, an opportunity to introduce themselves and say a little bit about them and their companies. And so we're going to start with actually, let's go company size. So I think that Stephen, we'll go small to large. So Stephen, if you can give us a little bit of 60-second bio about you and then your connection to Mason. And I think the one kind of personal fact I'd like to ask about you is, what is your one salient memory of, like, your most salient memory of your time in undergrad? I know you didn't go to Mason, but just overall. So Stephen, please, the floor is yours.
All right. I have to think about that one. That's a good one, Brett. So I'm Stephen Gulsh. I'm VP of People and Culture for NowSecure. We are a mobile app security testing company. We have software that shows vulnerabilities in mobile apps. So very relevant to the times. We are, on this group, we are only 89 employees. Some growth was supposed to have happened this year that has been postponed, but it's starting to pick back up again. My HR background is varied. I studied human resources when I was in college, and was fortunate to have had every job that I've held be HR. from hotels and restaurants to radio broadcasting to financial services, and now in the tech space. And
awesome. And your salient college memory.
Well, obviously there are some fun ones that I won't share here, but I think my most favorite, the most important memory to this was when I knew I wanted to study business. I also thought I wanted to be a teacher. And I remember when I first spent time with the professor who was in charge of HR, and I realized that this was a combination of both of those paths that I thought I was going to take with my career. And I've been very pleased with those paths.
And Stephen, just remind you are a board member on the College of Visual and Performing Arts for the university, correct?
Correct. I am on the Arts at Mason board, and I am the gala co-chair for Arts by George. So I was last year and am this year and will be next year because we've postponed the gala to next year.
Right, which if you've not had a chance, some of the faculty, the students, the performances that the university does are absolutely fantastic and amazing. Was at a reception at the president's house when I think the director of our music program just sits down at the keys of the piano and starts busting out Chopin. Yeah. And I thought that is unbelievable. I never have that ability ever in my life.
Linda is amazing.
Linda is incredible. We serve on faculty senate together. She is great. Marissa, I would like to turn it to you, please. Same question, overview of you and your company, and then salient memory of college.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Brett, for having me here. My name is Marissa Krafzig. I am the Chief Human Resource Officer for Intellidyne, which is a mid-sized government contractor. I oversee human resources, talent acquisition, and marketing. I was a student at George Mason. I got my Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology. I was actually applying for the Industrial Organizational Psychology Masters, but I was declined. And so when I thought, what am I going to do next? And my family said, consider human resources. So I got my Master's in Human Resources at Marymount University, and I love the profession.
Lester, how about yourself?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Brett. Lester Arnold, and I am the Chief HR Officer and Vice President for Human Resources and Payroll at George Mason University. I think you all know what we do there. From an employee size standpoint, we're looking at about 10,000 employees, both faculty and staff, wage, classified, and student workers. I've been there for about a year. July 1st was my first anniversary. So very excited about what's happened over the past year, not as excited about what's happened over the past months, but certainly the work and the job that I stepped into looks a little different as it relates to this pandemic and kind of working through, what we need to do to be successful and potentially get people back to campus safely. I actually have 30 years of HR experience, 5 years in higher ed. Prior to joining George Mason University, I worked for Winston-Salem State University, which is a historical Black college within the UNC system out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Prior to that, I spent 25 years in industry, working for a number of Fortune 500 in industry leaders. Spent some time with Wachovia, with Aetna. That was actually my first job out of college, doing some benefits consulting work. I'm originally from Hartford, Connecticut. My most recent corporate experience is with Focus Brands, where I was the chief HR officer in Atlanta. If you all guys aren't familiar with Focus Brands, it's all the brands that make you fat. Cinnabon, Auntie Anne's Pretzels, Carvel Ice Creams, Moe's, Slotsky's Deli, and I put on a couple of pounds while I worked for them. And again, excited about being here today and this discussion, and clearly here to respond to any kind of questions.
Awesome. Those are all the brands that you just say, oh man, I really have a craving for. I need a cookie. I need I need a cinnamon roll. So Lester, I think to get us start with, I'd like to direct kind of the first overall theme to you, and then we'll kind of go through. So, when a lot of this series, the other 10 or so Leading Patriots webinars that we've done have all started with the business continuity challenges that you and your organization and you and your role faced when we were hit by COVID in March and everything shut down. I'd like to talk about that a little bit, but I'd like to even shift it a little bit because we have now more of a kind of a window into time of what's happened. We talked about this yesterday. What is keeping you up at night? What are your stressors? What are your concerns? Both shifting from what happened in March and April, but now as we look at a safe return to campus and a safe return to work, as the Chief Human Resource Officer for the university, or VP of Human Resources, what are those major things that you kind of had those stressors in March, and now what are the new stressors that are coming in July and August?
Yeah, March stressors and July, August stressors, all stressful. I mean, March looked a little different because, we were focused on just understanding what this pandemic was all about and certainly the impact on the university. Our first thought was that, when we hear from the governor's office and we talk about, shutdowns and what have you, really didn't know what that meant and what it looked like. We didn't know how long that was going to happen. Maybe it's just a couple of weeks, which now turns into a number of months. And so, of course, that created, some stress, some stressors at that point, because we had to first figure out how are we going to do this? How do we communicate to our faculty and staff? Transparency is a must, but it's hard to be transparent when you really didn't know what was going on. So that was initially a challenge. You think about if we're transitioning from a traditional work setting and moving into the telework type environment. So what does that mean? How do we ensure that people have the resources to be successful? When we look at the technology piece, that's something that was pretty high on the list, of course, because we wanted to make sure that people were effective. And then again, you want to make sure that the employees weren't impacted, from a pay perspective. So, some of the stressors were around how do we keep people paid? How do we keep folks compensated? The different types of leave that were created, ensuring that people are still adding value, that they're engaged, and that we just be very agile and understand that we might look at doing our work a little differently. So what does that mean for those individuals who don't necessarily have a leave time to keep them paid on for a significant period? So we talked about training, we talked about project work, we talked about documenting procedures, developing SOPs and things like that. It's too often that we're so busy in our jobs that we don't understand when we might have time to do, professional development and training and things like that. So we introduce all of that so that people can spend the time to do something that still adds value, but historically we may have had some difficulties with actually offering that up. So engagement is a concern. It was a concern then, it's a concern now, because this is a very stressful time. And for the most part, and if you talk to a number of your colleagues, it's pretty obvious that we are working, around the clock. Our meetings are set back to back to back to back, and we're actually working at a pace where it's really unsustainable. So what do we do to ensure that people are engaged, that they are healthy? We take their well-being into consideration. So those are some of the things that initially kept me up at night. And now, we think about the safe return to campus and what that might look like. There are a number of people that may require accommodations, adjustments, or modifications to their schedules because they might be in a high-risk category. So developing a process for us to receive those requests and then kind of walk through how we're going to support those individuals and what that might mean for the units. I mean, one thing we do know is that we're still operational, whether we deliver our learning via distance learning, or we're opening the campus to a certain extent, so we'll have people there physically, so we're still operational. So how do we support our students, and what do we do to ensure that the folks that are there to support faculty and staff, that they come back to a safe environment? We have a number of working groups about 17 over at Mason that will address various aspects around a safe return to campus. And, we're working hard at, developing processes, policies to ensure that we offer exactly that, a safe return to campus. So we have to be smart about physical distancing, about dedensifying the campus, and truly be in a position where we still have the ability to provide the kind of services that we need to be providing to our students. So, and then you have individuals who are looking forward to coming back. Then you have other individuals who may still be anxious about coming back because there are still these unknowns. And we are doing our best to provide answers, to provide an environment where it's safe, and now moving into a direction where we're taking a very close look at how we're going to roll this out in the fall.
No, excellent. And I'm curious, just a quick kind of follow-up. In a traditional, let's say, fall semester that would start, how many wage workers, student workers, or new entries into the university does HR generally handle in a given year?
Yeah, it could be
not COVID year.
Yeah, about 4,000.
So 4,000. So starting in August, we've got to figure out how to onboard 4,000 potential new employees and do it at a remote or distance way.
Exactly. And if that number still is the appropriate number based on, our new normal.
Right. So I want to come back to that and the idea of onboarding and how we, as HR professionals, you lead an organization through that. But I'd like to, turn to Marissa. So, your company, I'm sure, has some similar concerns that, Lester discussed with Mason. And I think what's interesting from your side, Marissa, you have some security concerns that at Mason, we obviously, large public institution that deals with proprietary data, but we're not serving federal government and not serving some of those high security clearance issues. So if you look at that from your side, what is it that if you look at this kind of shift back, and I hear stories of the federal government starting to pull people back into, people in SCIFs never left, but then, some of the others, what is it that you're concerned about? What are those things that you're looking towards and having to manage in your role?
For us, one of the challenges is that we're putting our employees back to work in client locations where we don't have control. Unlike Lester, where you have control over the environment, you have the signage, you can ensure that you're doing the spacing for all the different workstations. We don't have that necessarily that access. And so we have to be working with our counterparts in the government to ensure that there is enough signage and that there is enough sanitizers and wipes, as well as opportunities for employees to be socially distant, especially in some environments there's very close spaces, like in a SCIF, and where we don't have so much control. So that would be a key concern for us. Like Lester, a lot of the things that keep me up at night is the health and safety of our employees. And thinking kind of big picture, as the majority of our employees, fortunately, have been able to work at home. I'd say about 90% of our employees had the privilege of teleworking, but that 10% did not. One of the things that we wanted to ensure is that we have continuity of operations, that we still had enough staff to stay with us, so those who were asked to stay wouldn't leave and find other opportunities where they could find remote work. So one of the things that we did was we gave a COVID bonus to those employees who were asked to come on site and support our clients. So that was one of the big things. Another stressor for me is anxiety and stress of our employees. And this is a new environment, and while teleworking can be fun, under COVID, when we're isolated, this can be a challenge. That social interaction that you have is so critical for feeling connected. And this whole COVID has made us feel isolated. And so that's another stress. And then a bigger stress for a lot of working parents is what's going to happen in the fall time. So being able to perform in your job and then having the added stressor of being the educator for their one or more children during the work hours. So that's a big stressor that's coming up, and that we're looking on how we can help support our employees during that time.
This is relatively to the group, but that one resonated. We had a panel a couple weeks ago. We had a superintendent. It was on future of education, superintendent and two principals. And we had this idea of families. And it doesn't seem like the American society works if parents have to be primary educator, primary breadwinner, and household raiser. You can't do all of those things at the same time. And we're finding that work culture suffers if parents, especially people like, my family, small young children take a lot of time. And I'm curious to the group, what steps are your companies taking, your organizations, to address that? And Marissa, you kind of talked about it. I'm wondering if there's anything specifically that you'd like to highlight of either you've seen peers talk about or you yourselves want to implement to address this, because it seems like such an enormous issue as we look to the fall.
So we provided a return to work survey to our employees about 2 weeks ago. As our government clients are saying, we're looking to start people coming back. We wanted to see if anyone had any concerns, whether it was childcare or if they were high risk, that we could address that early on. So 20% of our employees indicated that if they had to return to the work site, they would have difficulty with childcare. So while we haven't implemented any strategies, the next step is for our managers to speak with our employees to get an understanding of what their actual needs are. And then we can look at doing some strategies, whether it's compressed work weeks, or if we can do rotating, or if we need to hire part-time employees to offset the days so that employees can work 2 days on, 2 days off, and then, stagger their shift. So those are the things that we're looking at right now.
Stephen, how about you guys?
Yeah. Well, it's been a big change to our culture, obviously. We were already 60% remote. So people have been working at home. I mean, we're a tech company, so people are working at home. They know how to use technology. They're on their laptop all the time. But I started when we first went to everyone being 100% remote, really welcoming the families to our meetings. So when we were having like a company all hands meeting, or when we were having, we have a monthly company all hands, but then every 2 weeks we do something. The second week is just a get together. And so we do a lunch together. We do not talk about work, but we are together on Zoom, cameras on, mics off. And there's specific questions that we ask people to share. And, it's moderated by me, much like you're doing, Brett. But we encourage that employees have their children sitting with them, and dads holding their babies while they're talking to us. And so that still carries into some of our junior management meetings and other things that, a dad has to tell the kid to be quiet because he's on Zoom with the CEO and the head of HR, and it's kind of fun and cool. So that was a big thing that we started to do. But in those meetings, we also, at the beginning, when it was still questionable of what was going to be happening and for how long, one of the sections that we did was a discussion of who wants to help with schooling of our coworkers' kids. So we had some people volunteer to do some lessons to other people and get them involved in activities. Our company lives in Slack. That's our communication tool of choice. And so we've got our Kids of Now Secure channel for parents to post pictures. And so they've been doing exercises there where people without children also have been joining in to give them other things for helping with counting. And, the thing that everybody was doing with animals in the windows, our employees were posting pictures of animals in the window so that you could share through mommy's laptop and count other animals other than just your neighbor's windows. So I think those were really fun. Yeah, exactly.
We had shamrocks in my neighborhood.
Yeah. So those are the things that I started, just introducing. Another thing that we did that I think was really important, we have for tracking of if you're out of the office, we have an offline channel in Slack, and our holiday calendar automatically posts to that. But what I encouraged people to do and still to do is, we know that you're a parent, we know that your spouse is also working from home. So people have started posting in that channel if they're offline for the next 3 hours because they are doing parental duties. And it was, the head of HR saying, please use this as the tool for reporting it, not as if you need to or when you want to, but we are encouraging that you just let us know that you're doing this to help set expectations. And that has been something that was really well received and is really well used. And I think that is sort of also the release button that some employees say, okay, I can close my laptop for the next 2 hours because I've let people know that I have to close my laptop for the next 2 hours. And it also has pushed up into our organization to some other people who may not be as open to letting people have time out of their day to take care of their children. It has reminded them that that's what we face at these times, and that we need to support it and encourage it.
Yeah, we're relatively going a bit off script, but I think that adds such a fascinating thread to kind of pull of, do employees and then up to managers do the employees need to feel empowered to understand that they can be parents and workers, and that, you have to have that flexibility. I just think of my staff, I always want them to feel like they have the ability to do that, to take care of their family. And I understand they will get the work done. I'm not interested in 8 hours of work. I'm just interested in getting the work done.
I'll add one more quick point, Brett. So I also regularly, every day, reach out to a selected group that I choose, but random group of employees, and just check in, quick Slack message, hop on a Zoom, whatever they need. And I was checking with a woman on our sales team who is in California, and we were having a good chat, and she said, I asked her, how's your mental health? What are you doing to get through this? And she said, well, I finally put on my schedule 1 day a week where I stop at 6 p.m. so that I can go for a walk with my boys. And I was like, what? You're on the West Coast, we're East Coast. That's 9 p.m. Please, more than 1 day a week, at least 3 days a week, put it on your calendar that you can walk with your sons. I mean, that's a wonderful thing to do, and please do that. And so regularly I'm checking in with her to make sure she is actually taking that time to walk with her sons at 6 p.m. West Coast time.
Well, Lester, you and I talked about that there'd been, notice that, this huge drop in PTO from when people were taking it at George Mason over the last couple of months, yet how important that is. And that does dovetail into kind of this next topic area we want to address, which is employee well-being and ensuring employee culture of how do we make sure that our workforce is emotionally stable and emotionally ready to do the work as we're dealing with so many stressors in our lives right now. And, we've added multiple ones of, the virus is ramping back up, and what is it going to do to fall? And I'm just really interested, from your side, Lester, as you look at a big corporation like Mason, 40,000 students, 10,000 employees, different units, what can we do to start ensuring well-being and ensuring emotional stability of our workforce?
Sure, I think it's important, and Marissa mentioned this earlier. We need to ask the question. We actually plan to roll out a survey next week to Mason faculty and staff, just to learn a little bit more about their stressors. What's on their minds, what are they thinking as it relates to this crisis and returning back to campus. We ask the questions, and I think we take and we look at those responses, and that needs to inform our decisions and our plans as it relates to coming back to campus. So I think that's the first thing. Let's find out. Another thing too, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that, we are working at a pace that is just nuts at this point. And we need to make sure that we do a better job from a cultural standpoint, and embrace the fact that we need to step away, we need to get up. The walks that Stephen mentioned, and just to think about well-being and steps that we need to take to ensure that that happens. We just need to be a little more thoughtful and deliberate about implementing some of those types of solutions. Which, I would say over the past number of months, we probably could have done a better job. So there's more work that we have to do there. I have asked, and the leadership team for Mason has asked, that our supervisors, our managers, and our leaders, that there is a level of flexibility, agility, and collaboration as it relates to work times, whether we stagger, some of those schedules, whether we pay close attention to what's happening in the public schools. You already mentioned this, Brett. I mean, that's a significant challenge. I mean, it's something, I have adult sons, so it's a non-issue for me, but I do recognize that it is a huge issue for a significant portion of our work population, where they're trying to entertain their children. They're responsible for the online learning and ensuring that those, their family members are taken care of. So it is our responsibility as leaders to ensure that any kind of professional and personal needs are being met, that there is a required level of flexibility, and to really be sensitive to what our employees are saying.
That's a great point, and it dovetails actually with this great question from Nicole in the chat. And I was I was wondering, Marissa, if we could ask you first, and maybe if Stephen and Lester want to jump in. This idea of making the others in your C-suite, the other leaderships, understand that flexible time to your staff is important. And the kind of summarizing the question is, how do you make that as kind of the CHRO in the organization? How do you make that compelling statement to the other leadership members of your organization that we need to be flexible? We need to understand that we might be having work done at different times or different levels with COVID challenges, with remote working. And I'd like to throw it to you first in terms of how you're making that statement to the other leadership teams.
For our culture at Intellidyne, we have two directives: take care of our employees and take care of our clients. And so taking care of our employees, we are constantly assessing their needs, doing surveys, and getting feedback from them about what they need. So our C-suite is already vested and they are quite involved. So selling it is actually pretty easy. Our biggest concern right now would be turnover and losing employees to other organizations that can provide teleworking or more flexible work environment so that they can support their children and their learning at the same time. And so we need to continuously be looking at our benefits, at our offering, at our work schedules in order to us accommodate our employees and accommodate our clients' needs as well.
That's interesting. As a marketing professor, and Stephen, I'd like to let you chime in. I'd always start my kind of MBA classes with the idea of the most important asset for a company is its customers, and that's I think because of my bias as a marketing faculty and my colleagues in IO Psych, in OB or organizational behavior will challenge that it's the employees. The employees of the organization are the greatest asset, and so I think as you make that case, and I'd made a note when you had mentioned it before. We didn't talk about retention, but retention right now, I'm hearing it from friends, is a major deal, that people are jumping ship to companies that treat them better, offer those more flexible schedules. Stephen, yesterday in our call, you had mentioned that your company was just about to enter into some, gorgeous new building, or you just opened it, and then you have COVID. And so I'm wondering, I'd like to, you've got this great office space and no one can go in it, but, the idea of like maintaining a culture, I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about the kind of the challenges or what you're seeing for using that space and maintaining some semblance of social bonds in your organization.
Well, yeah, we just finished construction of a new office in Tyson's Corner, and we had just in the month of February opened a new office in Chicago, downtown Chicago. So Chicago is a little bit of a different story because almost 100% of that office uses public transportation to come to the office. And so even if the office was open, even if the building was allowing people in, even if the city was allowing it, public transportation is a whole different question. So our office, it is, I am about to push the button on an employee survey about what people are comfortable coming back to. Tyson's will be our first office that is a different situation because we do have parking there. Most of our Tyson's employees drive, so they can control, the safety situation of coming to the office. We just moved into a new building where they've put in some pretty good precautions, like the exit staircases One is set to be, going up and one to be coming down, except in the case of an emergency. They've got appropriate stickers on the lobby floor for social distancing. There are arrows in the four corners of the elevator to keep people focused in the elevator. They're asking that no more than 4 people be in an elevator. So some of those things are in place. We have stations right at the front of our entrance in the offices with, hand sanitizer and wipes, masks on. I did order the thermometers for all the offices so that we can check temperatures, although that's debatable whether it's really helpful. But I think what I'm finding that is probably going to be the way we start easing back into the office is more for teams to gather. So for example, our business development team, which is 6 people and their manager, that they can gather, of course, at social distancing in the conference room with masks or at least spread out, that they could have a once a week meeting in the office so that they can have more socialization and be together. I think that's how we will start rolling in. We are not just allowing people to show up in the office. One of the plans would be that you have to register the day before to come to the office space, so that we can appropriately social distance in the office. When we set up the furniture in the new office space, we actually didn't maximize it to what, we didn't buy additional workstations to build out what we built the office to hold. We only put in what we already had and have it really nicely spread out to make more, distance between people, and so that we can have people be more diagonally opposite. Is that right? Diagonal, but at a cross from people, and to give that comfort of space. I think the big thing is that we are going to just let people come when they are comfortable and not force it, but have options and make things optional. That's one of the things that I've learned through all of this, is that you can't do any one thing one way. You have to offer options to accommodate those people who are concerned, and those people who aren't concerned but will think about it once you give them an option and will be mindful of their own safety. And back to the point earlier, Brett, I think that's how it's helped to manage things up through the hierarchy in the organization, is by presenting options, makes people feel comfortable even at the executive level, and that they become more accommodating and understanding of, more thoughtful of, what we need to do to keep our employees healthy and performing.
Oh, that's great. Marissa, I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about, you brought up retention, and I'd like to get that with a broader theme, and then go to Lester next on onboarding right now during, the challenges that it's faced of how do you get new employees up to speed and get them integrated within a company. But also, what were you doing and what are you going to continue to do around talent development to ensure the continued progression of your workforce during both kind of a virtual standpoint, but also as we move forward into the coming months? And as you look at your leadership role, were there any sort of unattended things, Lester kind of mentioned, was there more time to do training that you didn't have before, or more time to provide professional development? Can you kind of speak to that kind of just overall talent development strategy? I know that's a broad question, but, kind of looking at, the next few months, how are you going to be able to really do that in really a very competitive job market right now, in the contracting space?
Well, we're always looking at opportunities to develop our employees and looking at what exactly they need in their current professional cycle, whether they're new into the workforce or they're mid-career or senior career. For us, again, we do surveys. We do surveys, and we also do pulse group conversations to get information on what employees need. In addition, our executive team meets with our program managers twice a year to get information on what trainings and development opportunities do their staff need. And so we look at it twice a year. But recently, we are doing kind of a pilot program where we are providing access to IT training, and almost 30%, we just closed it up yesterday, almost 30% enrolled in this technical training where they're getting access to on-demand training for certifications or just for extra knowledge. And what we'll be doing is we'll be spending the next year setting goals and monitoring their progress as they develop their technical skills. And those skills are relevant to our clients and to future work.
No, great. That technical skills thing, I think that's one as exec ed, we always balance that, you know, especially in somebody's mid-career into their, you know, senior, aspiring senior, having that right balance of the technical competence needed as well as the general business and acumen skills to kind of take a leadership role. So I always love those conversations with the CLOs, the CHROs of what you do to kind of help shape people, shape your employees and provide those avenues for improvement.
Well, we have so much at Intellidyne. We have a mentor program, we have a job shadow program, we have $5,000 that we provide on an annual basis to employees for certifications, as well as degree programs, or even just workshops. So employees can take advantage of that, as well as professional memberships. So there's so many opportunities. As long as you have a passion and a desire, you could take advantage of any ways to accelerate your career at Intellidyne.
You know, one you just kind of came up because we were talking about it before we actually broadcasted this webinar, that, you know, if I look at myself, I picked up kind of a new skill during this time. If I had to do video editing, because I didn't want to just bombard my staff with all these things. And it's kind of been fun to learn how to do Adobe Premiere and kind of putz around with it. And is that something that you, and I'll throw it to the group, and then Lester, I want to ask you that, you know, the kind of big onboarding question for Mason. But the idea, like, are you seeing that your employees are just kind of developing new skills that then kind of move the mission of the organization forward? How about Stephen? I'll go with you.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of fun to see the creativity coming out. You know, one of our first sessions where we did a company-wide Zoom, and I gave out awards for most creative Zoom background, since that's where we were going, and best use of company logo in a Zoom background. And so those kind of things people really, you know, were excited about, and they've been changing them. I mean, it's fun to be on a meeting and see people updating their background, and it rotates through when they're in, you know, a 1-hour meeting. But I think, I mean, we were already good, you know, strong technical people. But what has been good is to see, I think, how people have been coming together to work on some of our technical challenges, that they, you know, when they think about it at different times, when they look at it from a different viewpoint, instead of being able to chat about it in an office or, you know, in a more collective group, now they're doing it using, you know, technology tools. And I think people have taken things much more personally. It is also, I mean, one of the things that keeps me up and has worried me is the employees that we hired shortly before we went into quarantine. How are we developing them? How are we coaching them? How are we helping them? What part does COVID play in their performance coaching? And how does that compare? So if one person isn't hitting their performance goals, but somebody else is, and they both worth a similar period of time, then it's fair for us to make the judgment that they both were given the same opportunity. But if one person, you know, joined us in the middle of this and hasn't had the connection and bonding and interactions with others, we have to be more considerate and give them more time to pick up things that you don't realize are missed when you are in an office or with other people, even if they're not your direct peers on your team. And so that's definitely something that we've been trying to do. I'm sure not as well as Marissa with her organization, but we've been trying to match up people for those reasons. Like, how do we get the right mentor, but not as a mentor, so to speak, as much as how do we pair you up to give you the technical skills that you need to match up with this.
You know, Stephen, you said something that really resonated, because there's starting to be some preliminary data coming out from the academic side that female colleagues are taking the brunt of childcare at home. So they're seeing a drop. One of our deans was telling, data, and I think it was the accounting groups had done some research, if I remember the story correctly, that, or the data correctly, that, female professors are doing less research right now because they're having to do childcare. And so what that means then because they're taking more of the childcare burden at home. So that means for academics, as we look at promotion and tenure guidelines, that COVID is going to throw this giant, not asterisk, but we just have to deal with that and understand that and be, that senior, I think the statistic was like, if you're a senior faculty who's male, you're publishing or producing more research right now than you ever have. But female faculty are doing less because they're so encumbered by usually the childcare element of the organization, or the organization of the family. And that as faculty, we have to understand that situationally, it's not the same as when I went through, my tenure clock and didn't have any situation like this that threw a wrench, a giant pivot into what was going on. I think that's really interesting from how you evaluate performance. Lester, I am so sorry that you keep getting bombarded with questions in the chat and
I'm doing my best to respond to a number.
You're doing a fantastic job of faculty questions, hiring questions. So, I do want to ask you, when we look at Mason and this onboarding, how do you do that? How do you maintain, kind of Stephen's point, you're bringing in new people right now. I know, we've been on a hiring freeze, but we still have to, serve the mission. What does that look like as we go to even a hybrid form, and how do we maintain consistency in the quality of people that we need for Mason to move our mission forward?
Sure. And again, we do have to be very conscious of our mission. And so there is a need to continue to staff. So we get that. So onboarding looks a little different. I mean, I think about the administrative piece, especially when it comes to completing I-9s, providing documents and things like that. So there are alternatives to have those documents submitted to us, to ensure a couple of things that, of course, a person is qualified to work, within the United States, but also we want to make sure that the security is there as well. But from an onboarding standpoint, we just have to be flexible. We understand that the operation or the ideal way of onboarding may not necessarily be something that we can carry through or follow through on. So a lot of what we do happens virtually. There are conversations, there's discussions, the notion around, having conversations and understanding, who you might be partnering with, collaborating with, those are conversations that still will happen virtually. We do, and we host an orientation, prior to the beginning of any semester, and we will still do that, but we'll do it virtually. Whether it's a Zoom meeting, WebEx meeting, we'll still make that happen. And we have, we just recently had an orientation for staff, where we had, even our new president participated, and he did that via a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting. So we're going to move forward, and we'll continue to do that. We ask that the deans, the unit leaders, that they play a pretty significant role in this, where hopefully they will develop some of the onboarding plans for each individual that comes in new, and they'll collaborate with HR, and some of the learning that we've provided that used to be face-to-face, we've kind of reinvented some of that so it's delivered through our online learning.
Awesome. I know Lester and I had a conversation about this over the phone months ago when I was bringing somebody new into my staff, and I think it was April or May when they were supposed to start. It was, how are we going to do this? Right. Lester very clearly says, Brett, you got to document and have them go through the process and trust your team and your units to do it. And so, we've got another couple minutes, and I want to leave some time for audience questions. We've gotten a lot coming in, so we want to start getting to those. But I was wondering, the point that we wanted to end with from, our call yesterday as a group was, what does the office, or what do we think our workforce looks like a year from now, July 2021, and then what is it going to look like July 2022? And so, we look out a little bit. What do we think kind of that return to campus, return to work, what this structure overall within your corporations, within your companies looks like? Marissa, could you give us kind of a quick thought about that? And then we'll go Stephen and Lester, you can take us home.
Yes, absolutely. I think for us, I'm excited about evolving technologies. And I think in about a year, all the different big software companies will be providing more collaborative platforms to enable companies and employees to really connect. But what I'm excited about is the opportunity to tap staff or candidates across the organization. If we continue with this model of teleworking, it doesn't matter that you need to be living in the DC metro area. So for me, that is an opportunity that we can have more access to more potential candidates.
Yeah, I think that's great. Stephen?
So 2022, wow, that one, even though we've had a little time to reflect, I find it a little challenging to think about. I can give a little guidance what I think the office of 2021 is going to be like between now and then. Still very different, still needing to offer a lot of different options for people. I don't think that it will be, you will not have big company meetings and gatherings. We normally do a company meeting at some destination in January, and that's not going to happen. People still don't want to be on airplanes, and as an employer, we don't want to force them to be on an airplane if they're uncomfortable. So those kind of bonding things, I think, are not going to exist yet. And so we're going to have to find other ways to keep that, the results of gatherings like that next year are going to be a challenge to organization. And so what do we do to replicate those results from what we would have done at those events? How are we going to make that happen? Same with, in our space where people go to conferences and they meet different people, which some of those people become customers, some of those people become potential employees, some of those people become, your cheerleaders for other companies to think of you. That also in a virtual setting is going to be very difficult for companies to replicate. So I unfortunately just think that it's going to be more of how are we going to keep punting and bunting and whatever things to keep, agile in the workplace. That's going to be more of 2021.
Yeah, I think agility is key. And also this whole notion around never letting a good crisis go to waste. I think we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot, especially around agility, flexibility, the need to shift on a dime. And I think when you look at what the environment might look like a year from now, I don't think it'll ever return to what has been historically. I truly believe that we've learned a lot with regards to telework, looking at various alternatives as it relates to how we deliver learning, education, and how we can actually add value, whether we're in a physical office or not. I think Stephen already mentioned the fact that people will still be anxious. Although the airlines may be operational, you may have the opportunity to do more because the world and these states are opened up further. A lot of people will be very apprehensive about, being in a large setting, meetings and on airplanes and things like that. So there will be a need to be flexible and for us to take advantage of what we've learned from a technology standpoint and what we're able to contribute even working remotely. So I do believe that we're going to see more of that moving forward, and the ability just to deliver on what it is that we need to do to satisfy our mission and figure out how to do that without working in the traditional environment that we've been used to pre-COVID-19.
And Brett, I'd say that, we are pretty resilient. And I've been astounded at the level of how we have changed and embraced technology just over a couple months. And our perspective of we were not even doing video meetings at all. You were either in person or over the phone. And so video, people didn't want to show their home or what they looked like when they weren't in the office. But we've adapted, we've evolved. And for us, we've done a lot of employee events that we can collaborate. One thing that's been very exciting is that we used to have small little events at each of our different locations. And this has enabled us to really connect across the enterprise. We had an employee awards, which we normally do at each of the states that we operate in, where we have a lot of employees. And we did it with using Zoom. And we even replicated a happy hour before, and then we had the awards, and we were able to reach out to all of our employees at the different states, and we felt like we were all connected. And with their families in the room, it was an amazing and impactful experience. So I'm excited about what 2021 and 2022 will bring for employers and employees to evolve and adapt.
I think it's going to be very fascinating as I threw my my mouse on the floor there, so that's going to be fun to pick up. Well, want to leave time. We've got a couple minutes left if anybody else in the audience. We had a few comments that kind of echoed a lot of the statements that that you as panelists were making in the chat and in the Q&A. Lester, I was wondering, and I'm throwing you a curveball. We hadn't prepped for this, but I know this is something that Mason stands for, and we look to what 2020 is going to do. Can you maybe talk, as we look at Mason going into its next chapter under Dr. Washington on, maybe there's some diversity initiatives that you've started or you want to do forward that, maybe this pandemic and everything allows us an opportunity to do something as a university. So as we kind of wait for those, I know I didn't prep you for this one, so sorry about that, but just something that Marissa said, kind of, it struck a chord as well of, is there something around, that idea of doing more to improve Mason's diversity? Because it is such a part of our mission and what we are as a university.
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Washington mentioned is that he stepped into a role that, he accepted a position and he stepped into a role that he just doesn't look the same as to, as it relates to what he agreed to and what he accepted originally. And he is actually faced with 3 pandemics right now, COVID-19, racial unrests, and budget challenges. So there are a number of areas and really some hot buttons for him as he lays out his priorities. One of the priorities is to really focus on race relations, equality, and he has already instituted a new race relations group that will focus on taking a look at how the university and the position that we will take as it relates to race relations and how we show up, in this region, and some initiatives that we may want to employ to ensure that we have a place that's fair, that's equitable, and people are truly comfortable with from an inclusion standpoint. So that is high on his list. That's one of the things that I want to focus on and have been looking at over the past year from an equity standpoint and ensuring that we pay very close attention to our environment and creating a place of inclusion. So that is an area that is very important. It's high on his list and it's a priority that he's identified. And over the course of 2 weeks, has already made some efforts to address.
I look forward to really seeing him push the boundaries on there. And I was so blown away in his interview or in the comments I've seen him talk about of changing how we view hiring, of not just waiting for people to apply, but actually being proactive. And in higher ed, that does not happen, right? We usually wait for people to apply and then we pick from that group. So I'm really looking forward to it. And Marissa or Steven, sorry, is there any elements around diversity as we move forward that you'd like to identify within your organizations or speak to for as we kind of end our session today? I'm going to duck under my table to grab my mouse that dropped.
Well, I mean, diversity when you're a small growing company is forefront for me, and trying to go through. I think for some people who didn't necessarily think it as critical, now see it through different eyes by having been home and seeing news broadcasts and seeing the reaction and understanding that, you know, that people have strong emotions about this, then encourages them to try to do things that supports a diverse workforce. And that means effort and energy and, you know, focus on different recruiting styles and practices. And so, again, as Marissa said earlier, I think some of what we've experienced during these times has been positive to encouraging that we look for differences in our workplace and celebrate those.
And for us, diversity is actually one of our 6 core values and something we hold very dear. But over the last couple months, with everything going on, it really got us to take a pause and take a look at, you know, our workforce. We've held 2 different listening sessions and gave our employees a chance to share their experiences. And it was eye-opening for a lot of us. And so there is a lot of work that we need to continue doing to make progress, not only in our organization, but in our communities. And so we're putting together a plan of action so that we can examine every different HR aspect, from hiring and promotion and pay, and to really evaluate and see where are there places that we need to look at and examine and do more. Actually, a couple weeks ago, our CEO made Juneteenth a company holiday. So he is extremely passionate. Robert Gray, our founder and CEO, extremely passionate and is leading the charge on this issue. And that's what's so critical. You really need C-suite buy-in in order for it to be effective inclusion and diversity efforts. And he's at the top leading the effort.
Yeah, I had a friend of a mid-sized government contracting company, same thing, Marissa, and he just said, you know, my employees, his CEO, he said, I thought I was doing a good job. And they challenged me in the last couple of weeks to say, we need to relook at how we're doing this. The diversity of thought, diversity of inclusion, you know, diversity of who we are bringing into the organization. And he thought, as somebody who is from an underrepresented group, that he was just naturally embodying those principles in his organization. And it was challenging to them of saying, let's look at this holistically as a company and grow it the right way, and grow it in a new way, a better way that actually takes on a few different things. So I think that idea of having it from the top, but he had to hear it from his employees first. And I think that was really, you know, to me, hearing that story was just fascinating of saying, you know, here's someone you think would have already been having a lot of those other programs, but he really needed to hear it from his employees, listen to them, and then act on those recommendations. So we are well past the hour. I do want to thank our panelists so much. Stephen, Lester, Marissa, I can't thank you enough for joining us this afternoon. This was incredible content. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be taking a little bit of a break with the Leading Patriots series as we start getting into July and August. Advancement and alumni and exec ed, we are going to be coming back with this, probably not as frequently, probably once a month, but we do want to continue to have more of these topic areas. To Marissa, Lester, and Stephen, we'd love to have you back. Love to have you as involved. Well, Lester, you work here, you have to be involved. Marissa and Stephen, love to continue to get you involved with the stuff that Mason is doing, because it is a mission that at least I care very deeply about and what we're trying to do at Mason.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Brett.
All right. Any last comments for the good of the order, or we can go off and be done? Okay. So with that, gonna end it. Thank you all. Be safe and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.